Did you guys know that propaganda actually had a huge influence in the creation of what we now know as MI5 and MI6? Well, in this video, I'm going to explain everything to you. So let's start with what is the secret state, right? So the term secret state can be used to anything in any country. And nowadays, I would say that almost every country has some form of secret state. Secret state simply means organizations that are gathering data and they're doing secret military operations that they do not want to be known by the public. Why? Quite obvious, this can present a lot of risks. And countries need this for self-defense. So nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with a country having a secret state. In this case, nothing wrong with Britain actually having MI5 or MI6 or whatever else. So what are the origins? First of all, let me explain to you guys a little bit of the difference of three of Britain's main intelligence agencies. So we have MI5, MI6 and GCHQ. MI5 and MI6 started together, but they're different. MI5 deals with internal issues, the safety of the United Kingdom, while MI6 deals with external issues, foreign countries and things as such. Both of these organizations originated in 1909. At the time, they were created by two men and they were called the Secret Service Bureau. Later on, they were split and divided into these two sides. They both use HUMINT, which is human intelligence. There are different kinds of intelligence collection techniques. MI5 and MI6 rely on HUMINT, human, which means spies. Yes, exactly that, James Bond and the thing of the sort. But the third one, GCHQ, we're not going to be talking about GCHQ in this video, but I'll explain to you because we'll talk about them later on. They deal with signals intelligence, so the collection of intelligence through communication methods like radars, like internet. MI5 and MI6 are the first official ones. Now somebody's gonna say, but of course Britain must have had some kind of intelligence agencies before 1909, right? Well, it did have. Actually, the first records we can see go all the way back to the Tudor times with Queen Elizabeth I. She had kind of a spy master in her government, which is John Dee, but we'll talk about him later, right? That's a completely different thing, and there's a different way of operating things to what we have in a more modern side of history, which is with MI5 and MI6. Queen Victoria also had her own spy rings, which mostly were her relatives because she had a huge family and she was the grandmother of Europe, and she sent her children and grandchildren to all the major countries and they spied on stuff for her. That's a different thing as well. But officially, the British government created these two organizations in 1909. However, here's where it gets interesting. It seems to many historians that it was the use of spy novels, which means the use of propaganda, that pushed for the creation of these two organizations 5 years before World War I even broke out. Now let's look at this. I have here with me a journal from the Studies of Intelligence, and it talks about In the Service of Empire, Imperialism and the British Spy Thriller 1901-1914. So what we have happening here, before 1901, we don't really see spy thrillers taking over the entertainment area. But after 1901, we see a massive rise in the publication of spy fiction in the UK. This created a cultural phenomena that will be very crucial for us understanding the need or why MI5 and MI6 were created. This cultural phenomena was drawing massive numbers of readerships across all classes and catapulting its authors to prominence as spokesmen for the widely prevalent concerns about imperial strength, national power, and foreign espionage. Now, let's look back at history. At that time, before World War I, the Prussian Empire, which is now Germany, was gaining a lot of power, and that could have seemed as challenging for, at the time, the British Empire. 300 is a conservative estimate of the number of spy novels that went into print between 1901 and 1914. One great example of these novels is Queux, written by Rudyard Kipling. It's a tale of a streetwise orphan who trains as a spy and becomes embroiled in an intelligence duel on India's northwest frontier. We also have another one called The Riddle of the Sands by Erskine Childers, which is the story of two gentlemen yachtsmen who, cruising the North Sea, stumble upon a secret German plot to invade England. Now, the most famous of all authors is this guy called William Le Queux. Why? Well, let's take a look at what he done. Not only in 1909, he published The Spies of the Kaiser, which is considered by many historians as a prophecy of German espionage in advance of an invasion. But thanks to the publication of his most controversial novel yet in the subject, called The German Invasion of 1910, wow, that we see the true impact and power that Queux's work had on the creation of a whole panic in society that pushed to then the creation of MI5 and MI6. Now, it's not only me who is saying this, but we also have Christopher Andrew. For those of you who don't know, in the intelligence academic community, he's widely known because he published many works, like these two excellent books I have here in my hands. The first being the official authorized history of MI5, and the second one being The Secret World, which talks about the secret world of intelligence in the UK. Actually, not only the UK, but worldwide. So two excellent books. He's a very renowned historian for MI5. So according to Christopher Andrew and Bernard Porter, they have both shown convincingly how popular authors from the period were implicated in the business of scaremongering. Where have we heard that before? That is a very common thing we see all throughout history, right? Scaremongering. So according to them, these authors like William Le Queux were behind the huge scaremongering that made all the British people, English people, be so scared of the Germans for years before World War I even broke out. And as we're gonna see in this video, they didn't have much to be afraid, really. A lot of this was made up stuff thanks to these fiction works by William Le Queux and other authors. Averaging 5 novels a year until his death in 1927, William Le Queux was among the highest paid fiction writers of his time, earning 12 guineas per 1,000 words, roughly $1,000 in today's money, the same rate as H.G. Wells and Thomas Hardy. A frequent ongoer of London clubland and very well traveled across some of the continent's most elite resorts, Le Queux claimed to know everyone in Europe worth knowing, from Queen Alexandra, repeatedly his biggest fan, to famous French writers and anyone else that was relevant at that time. Throughout his career, Le Queux presented himself as a spy master, who, with an intimate knowledge of foreign espionage, battled dastardly foreigner nationals in the service of the British government. He set out to use fiction as a vehicle for political pamphleteering, designed to awaken the government to the uncomfortable truth that England had become idle and complacent. Obsessed with the end of the empire and fearing the encroachment of beastly foreigners into the United Kingdom, Le Queux began to forward reports to the Foreign Office, which, taken at face value, confirmed the existence of a German spy network in Britain. But that's not exactly what happened. Historians even argue that after all this German scare and after World War I, MI5 only captured a handful of spies during that time period. And the people that were reported as spies weren't really spies, but just people living their normal life, like somebody that fell down a bicycle and cursed a few words in German and that was seen as a spy, or perhaps a German woman living in the neighborhood that gossiped a little bit too much in German. That was enough at that time, because of the whole scaremongering, to accuse somebody of being a German spy. So we know from history that this idea that there's this huge network of German spies is completely unfounded, and that's still the reason why MI5 and MI6 were created, on a claim that was unfounded but was created through entertainment, spy fiction, and was pushed forward by the media, as we're going to see now. One of Le Queux's most famous supporters is Lord Northcliffe. Now, this is even here on the authorized history of MI5, talking about the fact that Lord Northcliffe, soon to become the owner of the Time as well as the Daily Mail and the Mail, was convinced that the invasion scare was well suited to the average Briton's liking for a good hate. So when William Le Queux published his novels, the Daily Mail actually went out with even publishing on their newspapers maps of possible locations that were targeted for this German invasion. And let's remember, the Daily Mail is actually seen as Britain's first mass circulation newspaper, so it had a huge reach back in the day. Striving for realism, Le Queux consulted military experts. He even spent 4 months touring the southeast of England in order to map out the most likely invasion route. As he wrote in the preface, the aim was to bring home to the British public, vividly and forcibly, what really would occur were an enemy suddenly to appear in our midst. So the invasion was published in 1906, and Le Queux described how 100 German spies prior to the assault had paralyzed Britain's defense by cutting telephone lines and destroying bridges, rail tracks, and coal mines. Newspaper serialization came with a special map illustrating the regions and towns where the Germans were to be concentrated. The invasion was explicit in agitating for a system of national service and its denunciation of Britain's slumbering statesmen for failing to prepare for a possible invasion. The invasion was a huge success, boosting the Daily Mail circulation and, in book form, selling over 1 million copies in 27 languages. Now, the public's response to this was absolutely huge. And William Le Queux, encouraged by this response, founded a voluntary Secret Service department, a group of amateur spy hunters devoted to gathering information that might be useful to our country in case of need. So in his novel after that, which is The Spies of the Kaiser, that was published in 1909, in that book he argued that to combat this enemy, the book championed the creation of a professional counterintelligence service, very much like MI5 and MI6, a message that chimed with the public fears of invasion, now at fever pitch with the Kaiser's announcement in late 1908 of an accelerated shipbuilding program. Everyone knows here and everyone agrees that at the time, Queux's publications, and Queux was an author that actually he was part foreign as well because his father was French, his mother was English, so anyways. Queux's publications, everyone agrees. The evidence which was produced left no doubt in the minds of the committee that an extensive system of German espionage existed in the country and that an organization was needed to combat that. So this, my friends, is how MI5 and MI6 came to existence, thanks to massive spreadness of spy fiction thrillers that created mass panic and a massive paranoia in the nation that people themselves push for the creation of a spying agency that could help defend the country, even though the threat was not real, as it states right here in this journal, that historical research has now proved beyond any doubt that no such extensive system of German espionage ever existed. Between August 1911 and the outbreak of the Great War, MI5 apprehended and tried only a handful of spies. So now you all know how the use of propaganda, whether there was somebody behind William Queux, somebody commissioned him to do this, or he just wanted to do it himself because he had experienced the Boer War that happened in the late 1800s, and whether he just wanted really to push this idea forward to the public that a secret service was needed to bring security, we will never know. But it is a fact that the creation of one of the world's biggest intelligence agencies, that now split into MI5 and MI6, actually originated from propaganda. And this is why I'm making this video, because that is my specialty, as I am a historian in the field of propaganda. So I hope you have enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for watching, and I look forward to the next one.